One of the things that I share with my chaplains is that when I bring them on and I do coaching with them before we set them out to even cross the threshold of a company site, I say, look, this opportunity should always be a blessing and not a burden. If it ever feels like a burden, we need to talk.
Awesome. Well, welcome to the Culture-neer podcast. I'm excited today. My guest today is Aaron Foster. He's the Executive Director of Operations.
Correct.
EDO. That's EDO. A little hard. First time I've heard that. For Marketplace Chaplains, which we're going to hear all about today. It's also a organization that works with one of our companies where we want to provide services to really let our people know how important they are to us and also help them in all aspects of their life. If you're not taking a holistic approach to leading your team and your company, I really encourage you to do that. It doesn't stop and start between 8 and 4. What happens at home, I promise you, is coming to work. And what you're doing at work should be, if you're intentional, going home and having a positive influence, or negative if you have a toxic culture when you go home. So, Aaron, welcome to the show today.
Yeah, thank you so much. It's great to be back to Southern Illinois. I was actually, in 1971, my mom had me over in Carbondale at the hospital. So I am a Southern Illinois, I guess you could say.
You're vintage
baby.
Like me.
That's right. Yes, I am definitely approaching those years.
That's awesome. Well, welcome back. We don't claim certain parts of the state, certain times of the year, and so we're kind of prideful about our end of the state. So I don't know why there's not a North Illinois and a Southern Illinois like North Carolina.
That's right. That's right.
But, it is what it is. But anyway, welcome back to God's country.
Yeah, thank you.
So share with us today as we get going a little bit about just kind of marketplace. A lot of our listeners maybe have never heard of it. I know I hadn't until probably about a year and a half ago. I think it's something that probably every business should be taking advantage of. It's obviously affordable. But I look at it as not a cost, as an investment in your people, which actually will have a return even on, these companies' bottom line. So tell us a little bit first about just the whole Marketplace Chaplain, and then we'll get back to talking a little bit more about your journey and kind of how you ended up.
Sure, yeah. So, most people have the same response when they first hear of Marketplace Chaplains. Who and what is this organization, and what do they do, and why are they showing up at the work site with chaplains? We get that question a lot. So the way that I heard about Marketplace Chaplains is that I was sitting in my church office back in 2014, and a recruiter was recruiting chaplains to serve a local company. And he sat down, and little did I know what company that he was looking to recruit for, which happened to be a company that I actually worked for in the corporate world for 15 years. And so what a really neat story behind that is, in 1998, when I was working for this corporation, I submitted an idea to the company owners that they needed some sort of faith-based outlet for their employees.
Wow.
And
full circle.
Yeah, that was in 1998. And in 2014, when I'm sitting in my office, this guy comes in. I say, I think you're in the wrong community. I don't believe this is really something that anyone here would go for. He said, no, I'm in the right community. And yes, I do need a chaplain. So I started out serving as a chaplain, and I did that role for about 4 to 5 years, and then was able to take the next step. And there's neat stories and amongst the stories, and so I don't have time today to probably share all those details. But lo and behold, that led then to me to become an executive director of operations, where I get to work directly with company owners. I get to recruit and hire chaplains to go and serve companies in the marketplace. And I got to tell you, it's an absolute joy and a lot of fun. It's a lot of hard work. And we hear a lot of, I guess you could say different types of stories from employees. But it's absolutely been a thrill ride, and I love what we do.
Wow.
But to go back a little bit about Marketplace and how it started. Yeah. So we are actually celebrating 40 years of being in the chaplain world. In the marketplace here in 2024. It started 40 years ago by a military man who stepped outside of the military, and as He was serving as a chaplain in the military, but as he stepped out back into the civilian world, he basically posed a question. That question was, if I'm serving one of the largest companies in America, which is our military, why aren't we serving people that actually are going to the office or to work every day?
Great question.
And he had a friend that owned a company. I don't know all the details behind that, but he approached him. They thought about it, and they said, let's give it a shot. And it started out small. And here we are 40 years later. The founder, Gil Strickland, passed away in 2023 in the fall. But he left a life of legacy and fulfilled, I would say, his mission, which was to go out into the marketplace, to care for people where they are. And that's what we get to do each and every day.
Wow, that's impressive. And your footprint is all 50 states at this point, right?
Yes.
I mean, what a huge reach.
Yeah.
I think there's credibility just in that. If people are listening to anything, wow, I don't know about what kind of need. All 50 states, are represented in that, and that's powerful. So, what inspired you to just pursue your current career? I mean,
well, as I shared earlier, when I submitted that idea in 1998, and then I have a recruiter show up in a year, honestly, where I should have said no to that opportunity. In that year, I developed insomnia. I couldn't sleep for months. And so I gave away a lot of ministry opportunities during that year and said, no, no, no. But then all of a sudden, the light bulb sort of went off. I had to say no to all these other things, as little did I know that this opportunity was coming. And so I said yes.
Wow. So think back to your childhood. One childhood memory that feels like a sneak peek into what you do now.
I would say this. I've always felt the hand of the Lord upon my life from birth. So I shared earlier, I was born in Carbondale, but I didn't stay there long. I was a preemie. I weighed 2 pounds.
Oh, wow.
It was airlifted to St. Louis, where I spent the first 3 months of my life. But really as a child, I don't have one of those moments where I didn't know the Lord and I wanted to give my life. I knew the Lord from birth. And it feels strange to share that often with people. It's like, really? I've always felt his presence. And I remember Mom tells the story better than I really do. So I'm kind of just reliving my mom's story. And that is that when I was in kindergarten, it was my first day to go to kindergarten and the car wouldn't start. Mom says she was trying to start the car and she looked over and there I was in the passenger seat. And I had my hands folded in prayer and just praying, Lord, please let this car start. I want to start my first day of school. And she said the car fired up and started, and off I went to my first day of school.
So you were a mini chaplain way back when.
I guess I was.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if your younger self met you today, what would surprise them the most?
Wow. My younger self met me today, probably would never, ever guess that I would be in ministry. Even though I had a heart for it, would never have thought that I would actually be part of it.
Yeah. If your 18-year-old self was to go back, or if you could go back to your 18-year-old self.
Okay, yes.
What kind of advice would you give? A lot of water under the bridge at this point.
I have 3 kids, 21, 18, and 17. And so, I know the kind of advice that I offered them today as a 52-year-old dad. But I'd probably go back to my 18-year-old self. So you probably need to listen more than speak. And probably hang around a different type of crowd. If I knew what I knew today, I'd probably hang out a few more 50, 60-year-olds and learn from them.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. Speaking of that, if you was to think about the 3 most influential people in your life that had the biggest impact, who would make that top 3?
I knew you were going to ask this question today, and I had to really hone in on 3 people. And one of the people that's really at the top of the list is my grandfather. He's passed away, but he was kind of a lay pastor in his early years of life. And so one of the things that we always enjoyed was going to Grandma and Grandpa Miller's house here in Southern Illinois, traveling 4 to 5 hours to come down and see family. And we have a large family here in Southern Illinois. But I just knew that when we arrived at their doorstep, that we were going to be loved on, that they were going to love us not only in the flesh as grandparents, but they're also going to treat us the way that Jesus treated others. And that is one of the things that has really shaped my life, is that our grandfather was in the Word, and he was definitely, I guess you could say, fiercely compassionate about others to know what he knew, and that was the Savior.
So talk to us about what kind of impact have the companies that you're serving seen? Because this is a foreign concept, probably for many of our listeners, just like it was for mine for several years. Like, what kind of benefits is the company owner or the managers getting by providing this type of level of care to their team and their employees?
That's a really good question. We always get, because as a company owner, they want to know, like, the ROI. What is my return on investment? And what we do at Marketplace Chaplains is we care for the employee. And so as we care for the employee, it really kind of comes down to one thing. And that is, the one question is asking, how are you? And then getting to know that employee on a relational side. We don't lead with faith. That kind of comes at the back end. We meet people where they are, and they get to choose if they want to utilize a Marketplace chaplain, or if they choose not to. We don't force ourselves onto anyone. I think the best illustration that I have is, going into corporate world, going into 15 years of ministry, and now doing this role. It's kind of both. It's kind of corporate and ministry, both. But the one thing that I often share when I bring on new members to the team is this story. And that is where I used to work in the corporate world. And I'd be walking down the hallway, whether we're bouncing from meeting to meeting or going to the restroom or getting a cup of coffee. And I would see leadership or ownership in the hallway. And we would make eye contact. And the one thing that they would share would be, "Hey, Aaron," which says, "Hey, I see you, I recognize you." And then, "Hope you're doing well," which is great. But what that really says is, "Hey, I see you, I recognize you, but I have no time to talk to you. But I hope you're doing well." One of the things that we really try to focus in on is, "Hey, Terry, how are you?" And then we pause. And that's the greatest benefit of what we get to do, is then we began to listen. "Hey, how are things going? Hey, how's your family doing? How are you doing today? How's your job going?" And then we build on that. "Hey, let us help you," or, "Hey, I have some advice here, maybe a little tip, and maybe you should go this direction." And we help people in the workplace, probably more primarily, really with personal issues than really job-related issues.
Sure. And so, as a business owner, what does that look like from my end? That's what it looks like from the employees that are getting served. What does that look like from my end? I'm have another expense that I'm paying out. What is that return on investment for the employees?
Yeah, so that return on investment, one of the things that we looked at, and because that's such a tricky question, because I have to share this for the listener out there that may not understand what we do, and that is that everything that is shared with the chaplain, and I use that old Las Vegas saying, like, whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas.
Probably appropriate.
And so whatever you share with the chaplain stays with the chaplain, because obviously if we don't practice confidentiality, then no one's ever going to talk to a chaplain. And so, but here's the reality, though. Here's the funny part of the whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas actually isn't a really true concept, because whatever happens in Vegas probably is going to come out at some point, right? But what you share with the chaplain does stay with the chaplain. And so that is one of our biggest focal points. So that's really, and the reason I share that is because as a company owner, they want to see the return on investment. We're not able to describe to them, every little detail that's happening in an employee's life. We do collect some data, and we do present that to the company owners just so they can see how at large we're caring for their team.
Yeah, I've been a big proponent for a long time, because I think, some people are bent towards, they just want to invest and help the people. They're generally concerned about their staff. They treat them like family, but that's not everybody's story. Right. For some people, it's like, listen, it costs this much to do business. My butt's on the line for a whole bunch of liability. Yep. This whole thing could end tomorrow. I don't need another expense. And I think for people even coming from that category, I've always been a proponent of, listen, if the guy that you hire has a great marriage when you hire him and he has marital problems while he's working for you, you don't have the same employee 6 months before that divorce and 6 months afterwards. The one thing about managing humans is there's so many variables in the performance. It's just like if you go out and go horseback riding all weekend, but you have a blue collar job and you show up on Monday, I'm probably not going to get the same level of performance out of you because of what you did Saturday and Sunday.
Right.
You're sore, you're stiff, you shouldn't have taken on something that, a 70-year-old man maybe shouldn't have done or whatever the case. So I still have to manage that. And so I think the beauty of the concept of the marketplace chaplain is, they're able to not just deal with crisis situations, because you can't separate work from home.
No.
Somebody has a baby and they're staying up half the night. Guess what? When they show up at work, you're going to have to deal with some of those challenges. There's all those different aspects of life. And at the end of the day, we're really all kind of doing life together. And I think, the quicker we understand just the aspects of life. Some of the stuff is so missing in our schools now over the last 2 or 3 decades. We have people that can't even manage their checkbook. And so, you could pay somebody $100,000 a year, but if they're spending $110,000, you're the reason why I'm starving at home.
Right.
I'm leaving a good culture and a good company because I need to make more money, when the reality is they need to manage the money better. But because they can't, you're going to deal with that in a work environment. They're going to be working under more stress, maybe paying higher interest rates if they have, bad credit. And that's going to come into their overall performance while they're at work. And so I think investing in those things that our employees are dealing with on a daily basis is smart business. Wouldn't you agree with that?
Absolutely. One of the things that we know is, as you described, and we call that when somebody's had a stressful weekend, whether they're contemplating suicide, divorce. And we talk a lot of people off the ledge every single week. Single moms that are trying to feed 3 children. We navigate those conversations very carefully. And what we've learned is that they're going to show up to work on a Monday morning. And we call that pre-absenteeism, where they're there physically, but mentally and emotionally,
so good.
They're not there at the job site. And so what happens at the company is you lose production. At the same time, there's a human being that's suffering. And so when we're able to step into a company that extends care, basically it's ultimately always based on the culture they're already providing. We piggyback on that. It's not like we come in and we steer the culture. No, we're piggybacking on the culture that you've already established, and we get to be a highlight to that. And really what it says is, hey, as a company owner, I said I was going to take care of you and provide resources for you, and we get to be that resource for them. Granted, we're not the end all. We want to get people plugged in, whether it be if they need to see a psychologist. We're gonna do some research and find a mental health counselor that's going to be able to help guide them in next steps. If they want to get involved in a church, we're going to find a church, a Bible teaching church that's going to get them to where they need to be. Maybe, we go through life and I find myself, hey, I've never been involved in a funeral service. I don't even know what to do. We're going to help navigate that and get them the resources they need to get through that time, not only to really plan a funeral, but emotionally, what does that look like?
Yeah. That's awesome. It's very hard to give what you haven't gotten for lack of, bad English there, but so true, because we have so many of us that have been raised, and grew up in a broken home, and, the experience we have may not be a good one, even with that. And so just having outside resources, I think, is tremendous. It's probably one of the things that I'm the most excited about as far as what we would consider to be a perk, for our employees, because I think it goes a long way just to say, what, we really do care. And here's a whole nother level of how we can say that. Talk to me about books, podcasts, resources, anything in those categories that have just had a significant impact on your life.
Yeah. So there was one that I read several years ago, and I cried all the way through the book. I'd actually taken a retreat, and here I am at Legacy Farm, right? I was on retreat, and I went to the bookshelf, and I saw this book titled Leading on Empty. is by Wayne Cadero. I believe he is possibly a pastor of a Foursquare church in Hawaii. I'd never really heard of the guy, but I sat down and I read that book in one day. And I cried through the whole thing because what I learned while being away in that quiet space was I was leading on empty. And that I felt very alone in that time. But that book just really opened my eyes to the fact, hey, I'm not the only one. Others have experienced this. And it just really got me to a new space. Okay, what are some steps that I can take to take care of myself so that I'm able to take care of others? Very impactful book called Leading on Empty.
That's good. That's good. What do you think is the most important lesson you've learned over your career?
The most important lesson in my career, I think one is, I don't know if I had to learn it, and I don't know if you can tell, but I'm a very passionate person. And if I do something, I do it with every ounce of my being. And I love what I do. So I believe it really comes with what is your heart's desire? What is your purpose? And then to fulfill that. And so just loving what you do. One of the things that I share with my chaplains is that when I bring them on and I do coaching with them before we set them out to even cross the threshold of a company site, I say, look, this opportunity should always be a blessing and not a burden. If it ever feels like a burden, we need to talk. And so that, I believe, is, again, going back to love what you do. The other thing, too, is really learning is don't take anything for granted. And, what you have today may not be there tomorrow.
Yeah, that's so good. So good. One piece of advice you'd give out to someone that was starting in their career, what would that be?
Surround yourself with great leaders. It's really pick your crowd and who can you learn from? Find the person that's doing it well and hang out with them every day. Ask questions.
That sounds like somebody that's a parent of teenagers.
Yes, absolutely.
That principle, though, applies, all throughout life. What's one lesson your job has taught you that you really think everybody should learn at some point in your life? That could be the job you're currently in, or it could be your previous corporate career.
I think boundaries. Have boundaries. Stay in the bumpers. It doesn't mean, sometimes people get confused with boundaries. Boundaries are set up to be a safety mechanism, right? Yeah. But it doesn't mean that you can't be innovative or creative or think outside the box. Yeah. Boundaries are just saying, hey, I'm not going to allow myself to go to the right or to the left. I'm going to use all the talents that the good Lord has given me, but I'm going to stay within the bumper rails. And I think that's probably the best thing you could do stepping in really any career is understanding the boundaries.
Yeah, that's so good. Final four little section, we do final four favorites. So these are fairly easy, but kind of fun. But what's the favorite part of your morning routine?
You're going to want this really established, highly, engaging answer.
Entertain us.
Yeah. So it's a typical morning routine is get up, use the restroom. And I would like to say, hey, I sit down, have my quiet time and do all that first. But no, it's got to be the cup of coffee. I got to go with that first. And then it is to have quiet time. I never used to allow myself, especially years past, prior to where I'm at now as an executive director of operations, in ministry or the corporate world, I would literally put my foot to the floor and then go 100 miles an hour. But I've learned some things, maybe too, because I'm getting a little bit older and a little bit slower, but maybe a little bit smarter, is incorporate at the beginning of your day the quiet time that you need to face that day.
Yes, that's so good. There's a podcast right there. Favorite way to unwind at the end of your day?
We have a family farm up in the Midwest, central Illinois, and I just love going out there. It's peaceful, it's quiet, and just to go and maybe hunting, I know it's not always at the end of my day, but just to be at the farm and really incorporate some space where I'm not involved or engaged in technology or TV, and just to unwind and really ponder, what really did occur today.
Reflection.
Yes.
Pretty powerful. Favorite book that stands out? I know you mentioned one earlier. I don't know if it's your favorite, but. Maybe it's one of the same.
It's an impactful one. It was one of the most impactful books. I'm not really a big on favorite book kind of thing. But I mean, the book that I probably am really heavily into each and every day, whether I'm listening to it on my travels as today or actually reading it, and that would be the scripture, and getting into it and reading it, because if I'm staying within that and learning and following that, then I'm probably going to be okay as things come my way.
It's been a bestseller for a couple thousand years, so there must be something in there worth listening to. Favorite magical moment you'll never forget?
When I was in 5th grade, I don't know what happened that year, but I was placed to the front of the class, and I became.
Was it a corner?
No, it was the front of the class, and I had become the class clown that year. And I was typically a straight-laced little kid, and but I don't know. We all go through these phases, right? I remember being in the front of the class, and then I turned my head and I looked to the back, and in the back row, there was this little blonde-headed girl. And I just said to myself, I'm going to marry her. And we've been married for 32 years.
Wow. I had that same thing happen to me in Mount Vernon, Illinois, in a gymnasium, and I was in the 6th grade.
Oh, that's amazing.
I seen my wife, the cheerleader. I'm going to date that girl one day.
Yep.
And 38 years later, here we are. So, best advice you've ever received?
This kind of came during my pastoral ministry years. It's one of those things that it's like a light bulb moment, and you appreciate it when you hear it, like, why didn't I think of this? But one of the things that I always felt guilty, right? People have expectations of you, or must be nice kind of moments. That is, people would call me and have a need. I'm like, hey, are you busy right now? Hey, I'm picking my child up from school, at 3:00 in the afternoon. Hey, I'm busy. I'm picking them up, taking them home. And, oh, well, must be nice. So I was sharing that with my cousin one day. It's like, I shouldn't feel bad. Like, I'm working 16 hours a day, and I just want to spend 15 minutes in that car ride to pick up my child and take him home. And she shared the best piece of advice. She goes, Aaron, you don't need to tell them what you're doing. Just when they call and they have a need, say, hey, you know what? I'm busy with an appointment. For the next 20 minutes, I'll be free after that. The best piece of advice I've ever been given.
It's good. What's one piece of advice you'd give to our listeners today?
That you have an appointment. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I mean, that's a great answer. I'm sure there's a lot of people in regret wish they would have taken that time with their kids.
I would say that whatever it is that you're going through today, it doesn't mean that's where you're going to be the rest of your life. So if you're struggling today, it really is seasonal. There really is only a time and a season for everything. And I know the people listening out there today may say, well, you know what? I've been dealing with this, whatever, illness or discomfort my entire life. But I'm still here to say to you that it is still seasonal, and that there is a brighter future coming and a better day.
So true. What are you doing to simplify your life these days? So much work-life balance that we talk about on this show, because we've got really good at being busy and really poor at being quiet and intentional and present. What are you doing to simplify your life?
We were all kind of reminded of that simplify a few years ago, right? When we were stuck at home. And it was, in a way, like it was catastrophe. In a way, it was like, wait, this is how it used to be. Not probably in my generation, but in my grandparents' generation and beyond, or in the past. So I think it's being intentional. If you want to simplify, you can't just expect simplicity to happen. You have to be intentional with that. So you have to create space in your life. And I was given a sermon many years ago, and in the midst of that sermon, and you can see my papers here. I mean, I got to have notes. I lost kind of where I was, or there was a distraction, and I paused, and I was able to pick up my pace again. But at the end of that, I feel like I'm failing because all of a sudden I lost my space. My brain kind of went dead in that moment. And so, I'm shaking hands at the end of the service, and this gentleman came up to me, and he's a company owner, and he goes, "You had a very powerful moment today." And I'm like, "When was that?"
Really?
And he said, "Yeah." He said, "The pause." He goes, "You had unloaded on us really a lot to think about." He goes, "And I know you were up there thinking that you had failed or that you had struggled." But he said, "Aaron, that pause was the most powerful moment of my morning."
The power of the pause.
Yes, the power of the pause. So you want to simplify? Hit pause.
Yeah, it's good advice. Good advice. Talk to me. I love this phrase, and we talk about this a lot in some of our circles. But what do you think today, 2024, what does it mean to man up?
I love this question, and I'm so glad you're asking me about man up. By the way early on in the podcast, you asked, "Hey, are you interested? I want to get you interested in man." I'm already interested in man up, so no work required there. And so, what do I think it means to man up? I did a funeral service. Again, it's just a lot of history here, right? And it was for a lady, but you're asking me about man up. But here's the thing, is this 90-year-old some lady who was tiny and frail. At one point, I think in her life, she had broken her hip, she had broken her leg, but she was up at the crack of dawn. She worked out on her tiny family farm, and she had something an old school word that most of us haven't even heard of in this day and age. And I shared this word at her funeral service, and I said, "It's something that we've lost. And here, you really want to man up." And I hope this word sort of like, maybe this podcast will bring it back to life, is the word grit.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of like an old cowboy Western kind of theme, kind of like word. But you don't ever hear that word really out. It's kind of old school. It's lost its flavor. But I think that's what it means to man up. It's like, you're a person of grit. And what does that mean? And I actually wrote down the definition from Webster Dictionary of what grit is. And it says, firmness of mind or spirit, unyielding courage in the face of hardship or danger. So what that really says is, no matter what I'm facing today, no matter how deep in the valley or how high that mountain is that I have to climb, I'm going to keep moving forward. And I have grit because I have a goal. I want to accomplish it, and I'm not going to let anything stop me.
You may just give me a title, Men of Grit. I like that.
There you go.
So we don't talk about this. I don't know that we ever talk about this on this show, but we do a adventure camp once a year called Man Up. And that's really where we get together just to not make our businesses better per se, but we work on making ourselves better men. And of course, the byproduct of that is if we're leading a business or we're leading people or we're serving in some kind of capacity, we just do it better because we're better. So anyway, I was curious what your definition was there, and I'm excited that you have an interest in maybe partaking in that.
Absolutely.
What does it mean to be a culture-neer? Name of the podcast, kind of unique. What does that mean to you?
I think to be a culture-neer, I think it starts at the top. Like, so, for instance, you're a company owner, and you have sort of in mind like how you want to operate your business. But also within that, you have a way that how you want to treat others. And I think it's a blend, is that you're going to set a standard. And so in order for you to be a culture-neer, you have to be the first one to practice it. And you have to set that as, hey, this is how I'm going to operate. And you make up your mind, hey, this is what I'm going to do, even in the face of adversity. And then what happens is people see your leadership and see your example. And then you begin to say, hey, I would like for all of us to operate in this fashion. And you get them excited about it. Yeah. Hey, how can we change the world? How can we change the marketplace? How can we serve our community and reach out and be an extension of the standard that we've set in place. And so I think the biggest key, though, if you're going to be a culture-neer, it's not only setting a standard, but I think it's to be consistent.
Yeah.
And just allowing that, and it's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. Culture doesn't happen overnight most of the time, even though we see some changes that come in our lives that are instantaneous. But to build a culture amongst a team that's really always changing and evolving is to really set that standard at the high level and to portray that to your team.
Yeah, it requires rhythm. It requires a routine. It has to be habit forming, and for sure has to be modeled, by the leader. As we begin to wrap this up today, tell us how you want to be remembered.
So I have a little bit of a funny story with this. I thought about this question a little bit, and I don't really, honestly, part of me says I don't care how I'm remembered. But in December, it was December 22nd. We had left home. We took our son to Pittsburgh on December 23rd to watch the Pittsburgh Steelers battle against the Cincinnati Bengals. And by the way, the Pittsburgh Steelers tromped the Cincinnati Bengals.
For all of our Ohio fans.
Yeah. And Mason Rudolph, it was perfect because Rudolph led that team that night and to victory. But as we actually traveled out to some families, our family's house in Ohio. And when we arrived there that night, Uncle Gerald was like, hey, I'm going to watch Willie Nelson's 90th birthday celebration. So I didn't know that he was a Willie Nelson fan. And so we're watching it, and then out comes this young man with his guitar and plays this song. And the song is actually written by Willie Nelson, but the young man that came out on stage was Lucas Nelson. And I don't really follow Willie Nelson, but this song mesmerized me and touched the core of me. And it was called Angels Flying Too Close to the Ground.
Never heard it.
Oh, it's amazing. So part of that song, and I'll send you the link to that song today, Terry.
Yeah,
you will have heard the song by the end of today. But it says, it basically emphasizes a love for someone that had an impact on their life, but it doesn't use words to describe like anything big that happened in their lives. It just says, just because really of who you were and how you lived your life and how you made me feel when I was around you. And made me feel better. So here's part of the lyrics. And it says, so leave me if you need to. I will still remember angel flying too close to the ground. And I thought, I want to be remembered that way. Not for really anything that I've done, but just how I made people feel.
Oh, yeah.
That's
good.
What's even funnier, though, this is the funny side of the story, is we left Ohio to go travel another 4 hours to Pittsburgh to the Steelers game. And I said, hey, my son Levi was on his phone, and he always has the tunes ready to go when we're doing a road trip. So he's always like 80s backflash. But I said, hey, look up that Angels Flying Too Close to the Ground. Can you play that one? And so they played it, and I was in our car, and I just cried. And I'm looking in the rearview mirror, and I catch the eye of my freshman college daughter, and I saw tears well up, and I just said to her, when I pass, I want this song played at my funeral.
Wow.
So I guess, and she came back with, Dad, let's go enjoy the Steelers game, and then we'll plan your funeral afterwards.
Oh, that's good stuff. So let's flip the script for a minute.
Sure.
If you could ask me one question, what would it be?
What do you love the most about your life?
Who I get to spend it with.
Who you get to spend it with. Mm-hmm. And who is that?
Well, I'm at the top of that list, obviously, would be my wife. That was a God assignment for me. And of course, then it just trickles down to the rest of my family. But it doesn't stop there. Somebody told me one time as I was getting into business is only hire people you want to have lunch with on your day off. And I've tried to practice that principle. And I think because of that, in a lot of ways, the people that work with us, not for us, they're all extended family. And so, who I get to do life with, that'd be my answer. So what personal achievement are you proud of that maybe not many people even know about? Be a curveball on this one.
I don't think in that realm. I just don't go there. Maybe, it's one of the questions I saw that you've sent out is like, are you introvert or an extrovert? Well, I can tell you I'm a highly introverted person, but I got to force myself to be an extrovert, and I can do it, and I can do it well. So when I kind of think of like accomplishments, well, I kind of feel the same way about that. I have things that I feel good about, but that I don't always want to share. Or I think the best thing, I guess, is that I feel good about is just loving other people and caring for them and doing the best that I can to help them, even again on the hardest of days.
How's your definition of success at this stage in your life changed over the years? I'm sure it was probably a lot different just coming out of college, getting into your career to what it is today.
So what was the question on that again?
Well, how has your understanding of success changed? For a lot of people, they spend their whole life climbing the ladder and they get to the top. It's like, wow, this is it. It was leaned against the wrong house here. What's going on? Yeah,
I agree. Honestly, at the end of the day, my mindset is really is that every day I try to take one step further away from this world. And that's really it. And I have this goal in my life is like, I do not want to have any debt to this world when I perish, because I don't want anything here to carry over into my family, but I don't want to have any debt than maybe the debt that I owe, right, to my Savior. But I don't want to have any debt on this earth, and I don't know that I'll accomplish that. But I don't want. To me, that just feels good that I own nothing here, because I think we strive to own things and possess things and to do things, and I don't want to own anything. I really want to step into heaven not owning anything on earth. As a matter of fact, even my family. So, a funny story is when my wife and I, so we met, obviously I set eyes on her in 5th grade. We ended up marrying in June of 92. And when we were on the dance floor, she was dancing with her father and I was dancing with my mother. My mother whispered into my ear, "I don't want to be a grandma for 10 years. Well, my mom's asking, like, when are we having babies a year or two later? And guess how many years it took for us to have our firstborn child?
10 years.
10 years. So one of the things is when Avery, our oldest, was born, is once you hold your child in your arms that you didn't know you would ever have, the greatest gift that you could really ever receive in this life is a child. So you get to love to them and pour into them. And little did I know that I would have one, but blessed 3 times over. But I began as I held Avery in my arms and we took her home that first day. And by the way, I usually drive 60, 65. I think I drove 45 miles per hour all the way home that day.
Precious cargo.
Yes. But my wife went to bed to rest and Avery was in her crib. I went to Avery and I put my hand on her head and I gave her back to the Lord. Because I knew that if he ever chose to take her away before me or any of my children, and I did this with all 3 of my kids, I gave them back the very first night we brought them into our house so that it would be a little bit easier to let go of them.
Those powerful words. We'll transition to rapid fire, a little bit fun questions here.
Okay, sure. Sorry, I'm getting serious on you.
Yeah, you got all deep on me. Wow. If you had to eat one meal for the rest of your life, what would it be?
Easy. Smoked wings and with a little bit of ranch, and it's game. That way, every day feels like game day, right?
There you go. 2 biggest pet peeves.
This one's changed over the years, and I don't know if you recall in Christmas Vacation, Aunt Bethany. Do you know what I'm talking about? Aunt Bethany sitting at the dinner table
Yes.
At Clark Griswold's house, and she says, "What's that sound?" He's like, "Do you hear it? It's a funny squeaky sound." And then I think Lewis is the guy that says, "You couldn't hear a dump truck if it was at a nitroglycerin plant." And so what's funny is my pet peeve, I'm sort of like becoming an Aunt Bethany, and that is like little noises. Like I won't hear the things I need to hear, but I'll hear, yes, that will definitely cause me to go into almost a rage. So clicking, tapping, my wife is like, like chomping on food and those things. So I find myself kind of evolving into that space. And,
I think it's called getting old.
It is. And I'm not sure that I enjoy it just as much as they don't enjoy being around me with that time.
Time travel. Would you go to the past or would you go to the future? Sounds like you'd go to the past based on those two answers.
Oh man, the past. There are so many good things about the past. My son says to me all the time, like, "Dad, I really wish I grew up in the 80s when you grew up." I said, "I bet you did." We weren't recording little videos of what all of our friends were doing at school. We had the best music, right?
No doubt. And the best hair.
And so he's like, "Dad, you got to go and hop in a car with your teenage buddies, and your parents didn't even know where you were." And my kids aren't, I know I could pull up my phone right now and pull up Live 360. I know exactly where all three of my children are. One is married, and I still know where they are to this day. So I think really going back, I think the future, like, why go there, right? Because it's hard enough to live today. So why move to the future when we go back to the past, knowing what it was already like?
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. And I've had a great time today. Tell the audience where they can find out more about the Marketplace Chaplains. Yeah,
so go out to Google and basically type in Marketplace Chaplains USA. I think it's mchapusa.com, and you can learn more. All you gotta do is type in Marketplace Chaplains. It's gonna be the very first thing that's gonna pop up. Click that link and you'll be able to find us. You'll be able to see me within that link as well.
That's awesome. Listen, I appreciate you driving down to God's country from Central Illinois today and spending a little bit of time with us. I know we'll be together tomorrow at the Ripple Effect. Looking forward to continuing to work with you with our company. Just been a pleasure to have you on the show today.
Likewise. Thank you so much, Terry. Appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, listen, till the next time, we'll see you the next time on the Culture-neer podcast. Terry Gwaltney from the Culture-neer podcast. Listen, I want to say thank you for listening to the podcast today. I also want to encourage you to help us get the message out to more people. If you could like, share, and review this content on wherever you consume it, if you go into YouTube or LinkedIn or just whatever your social media channels are, and you could even share it, that would be a big help to us here at the Culture-neer podcast. Also, if you'd like some more information, you can go to www.terrygwaltney.com, where we have updates. We also have more resources. We share articles there. And you also can find our new book there called The Culture-neer. Again, we want to thank you again for taking time just to listen to the podcast or view it on YouTube. It's our goal to spend 20 or 30 minutes each time we're together to help grow your culture to a point where your employees refuse to leave and your customers can't resist. This is Terry. We'll talk to you soon.